there are federal judges that are consistently trading in the equities of the companies that are in front of them. And so how can you...
This is Robert Kaplan, president of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank, basically the Dallas branch of America's money printer. One of the Federal Reserve Bank's main purposes is to supervise and regulate financial institutions and activities, meaning Fed officials have a lot of inside information on things that affect companies on the stock markets. So it would make sense that the people working here shouldn't be able to use their insider knowledge to trade stocks, right? Well, yeah. But while the Fed was desperately trying to figure out how to handle the pandemic, Robert Kaplan made multiple stock trades of over $1 million in companies like Delta Airlines, Apple, and Occidental Petroleum. The results? Delta Airlines got a bailout of over $5 billion in 2020, the same year Kaplan bought into the airline stock. While at the same time, the Fed was also buying Apple bonds to keep the company out of debts. And Robert Kaplan's punishment for insider trading? He stepped down in October 2021. Apparently, he didn't want to risk becoming a distraction to the Federal Reserve's execution of its monetary policy. Anyone else committing insider trading would have gotten up to 20 years in prison and a fine of up to $5 million. Robert Kaplan? He received an early retirement. But Robert Kaplan wasn't the only one. There's also New York-based federal judge Edgardo Ramos. He owned ExxonMobil stock while also presiding over a pollution case involving ExxonMobil oil. His verdict? The insurance company had to pay Exxon $25 million plus $8 million interest. When asked why he didn't excuse himself over the conflict of interest, he said it was because it was ExxonMobil oil, not regular ExxonMobil. Then there's Federal Reserve Vice Chairman Richard Clarida. He took millions of his own money out of bond funds and put them into stocks in February 2020, just as the Fed started slashing interest rates on repayments, which would typically increase stocks. And then there's Federal Judge Timothy Batten, who heard 11 lawsuits involving the bank JP Morgan in just 1 year. What no one else knew at the time was that he also owned shares in JP Morgan at the time of the lawsuits. Conveniently, most of the suits heard by Judge Timothy came out in favor of the bank. When asked why he never reported it, he said his investment was managed by a broker and he had nothing to do with it. And the great thing about all of this is that it was all legal. Federal judges deciding over huge cases involving companies like Apple, Facebook, or Amazon, cases that can move the markets, could also trade knowing those decisions. Federal Reserve officials with the power to set interest rates and offer bailouts that again move markets are trading stocks in the same companies they're supposed to oversee. And if you think it's just a few people here and there, you are sorely mistaken. Forget Wall Street. This is the real insider trading that slipped right underneath your nose. September 28, 2021. The Wall Street Journal releases a shocking report that 131 federal judges heard cases where they had financial interest in between 2010 and 2018, and suddenly, it opened the floodgates. 685 cases heard over 8 years, and 2/3 of those cases, they ruled in the favor of the judge's financial interests. The amount of research the article must have took is mind-blowing. Unlike politicians, federal judges don't need to disclose their financial records. They can't be found online, and requesting them means telling the judge you're looking into their finances. It's one of the reasons no one did it before. What lawyer is going to put their name on a financial report request when they may need to argue a case in front of that same judge in the future? 131 judges, knowingly or unknowingly, traded stocks in the companies involved in their cases. But it wasn't the only shocker. Because once the Wall Street Journal released their reports, people started to notice other federal employees doing the same thing. Less than a month after the report was released, a request was put in for an investigation into Federal Reserve officials doing the same thing. Turns out more than 3 high-level people at America's money printer made suspicious trades during the time the Fed was responding to the pandemic. Those officials resigned and had to sell their stocks. No prison time, no fine, just a slap on the wrist. And the federal judges? Well, they had more wiggle room to explain their conflicts away. And here's how you can do it yourself. Step number 1, become a judge. Step number 2, specialize in court cases dealing with public companies. These are the cases that matter, where your decisions have the power to move stock prices. And if the company is big enough, your decision can move markets. Step number 3, offshore your insider trading. Once you know what direction the case is headed in, what direction you're going to rule in, then it's time to offshore your insider trading. Your goal is to create a wall between you and your trades. And there are 2 ways you can do that. One way is having your investments managed by your brokers. Another way is to do what the politicians do and have your family members do the trading for you. That way, in both cases, if you ever got caught, you can just throw your hands up in the air and say, I didn't do those trades, they did. I didn't tell them anything. When you and I both know the truth. Now you may be wondering, how is any of this possible? How is it legal for judges and officials to trade stocks in the companies they oversee? Well, technically, it's not. In the case of federal judges, there are very specific guidelines for what to do in a case where there's a conflict of interest. The most important thing is that you recuse yourself from the case. This means they excuse themselves from that case and hand it over to another judge. Courts have conflict screening software that scans for possible conflicts of interest between the judge and their case. If anything pops up, they have to recuse themselves. The only problem is this system has a lot of holes in it, like the case with Judge Edgardo Ramos. The conflict screening software didn't recognize that ExxonMobil and ExxonMobil Oil are the same entity because it only looks for exact matches. There's also the issue of using brokers to manage their investments, which is what a lot of judges do. In these cases, there's a lot of plausible deniability. How was my broker supposed to know that I was ruling on a case involving Facebook? That kind of thing. All of this makes it very easy for judges to overlook the fact that they're involved in a massive conflict of interest. And when they get caught, they just say they never knew and they're really sorry. The same goes for Federal Reserve officials. They have such wide-reaching influence that it's like giving politicians the keys to the ballot boxes and assuming they won't be meddling in the election. But back to the original question, how is any of this actually possible? It's because of a very simple rule. Any federal judge or official should not engage in traits or behavior that even just appear improper. They're supposed to behave in ways that make sure the public trusts them. And that leaves a lot up to interpretation. With the rules very subject to interpretation, the judges and officials were free to do whatever they want. But hopefully that's all about to change. New legislation is on the table to make insider trading for judges and Fed officials illegal. The newly proposed laws would make it so that federal judges will have to disclose their trades online within 45 days of making them, basically the exact same rule Congress members follow. But at least here, the judges aren't the ones writing their own rules, like it is for politicians and their insider trading. What's up guys? It is currently 4 AM here. A little shorter of a video than usual, but it was still an important topic that I wanted to cover. If you're new here, subscribe for the #1 channel for documentaries on money, power, and crime. We have an amazing documentary coming out on our good friend Jeffrey Epstein that is obviously way too controversial to post publicly, so if you want to watch it, click that join button below and it should be up within a few days of this video going live. There's a refund policy, so if you join and you don't think it's worth it, you can email me and I will personally refund you the money, so pretty much risk-free. But that's gonna wrap it up. Stay dangerous out there and I'll see you guys in the next one.